without further ado, I shall introduce David Heathfield, who is going to entertain us with tales I've been told.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Richard and to Susan for organising this evening, inviting me. I've been here before. 3 years ago, I was here telling tales from Devon, or from the West Country. Was anybody here 3 years ago? Would you? Yes. A few of you. Okay, so a few of you. You've come back. Okay. And this evening is going to be a little bit different. The title of this evening, the event you've come to, has been advertised Tales I've Been Told. And that's the short title. The whole title of the event is Tales I've Been Told on Travels Around the World. And I've got the good fortune to have been told many stories from people from many, many different parts of the world in my work as a storyteller and as a teacher of English. So much so that at the moment, this is my main project in my career at the moment, is collecting and sharing stories from many different cultures. And I'm going to explain the different stories as we go through, but I was just asking a couple of people before we got started about connections they had in other countries. And it seems that some of you do have connections with other parts of Europe or even Africa and America. And maybe other places too that we might find out about as the evening unfolds. So I'm just going to make sure my mobile is on silent or switched off. I'm sure you'll have done the same. And
very subtle.
Subtle hint. And we'll make a start. I'm going to start by telling you a story that I learned from Serhiy. And Serhiy is a student who's studying business at Exeter University. And I met Serhiy about 5 years ago when he first came to Exeter. He's been here for quite a while. And Serhiy is from the Ukraine. Any connections with the Ukraine here? Okay.
Where is it?
Where is it? This is why I have carried the world with me to this event. Here is the Ukraine. Of course, it was part of the Soviet Union, and Kiev is the capital, and you've probably heard about all the disasters that have happened in recent days and weeks with the freezing temperatures. But there's a story that I'm going to tell you from the Ukraine. And it's a story that's known not only in the Ukraine, but I can tell you it's known right across Russia. Because in fact, this is a folk story that's one of the best known, best loved folk tales in all of that land. And it was turned into an animation which won an international animation prize in the late 1980s when it was still the Soviet Union. And the story is the story of the dog and the wolf. Has anybody got a dog here? Is it a young dog? Has anybody got an old dog? Well, this is maybe about your dog. This is a story of an old dog whose name is Serhiy. And Serhiy had worked for the farmer for many a year, catching the rats on the farmyard and doing his best. But now he was older and slower, and his eyesight wasn't so good, and although he had a keen sense of hearing before, it wasn't so easy. But he still had a good sense of smell. But the farmer said, "You're useless to me now, Serhiy." And he drove Serhiy away from the farm and over the fence and back and through the fields until he came to the forest. And there Serhiy wandered between the trees, and it was dark, and Serhiy was afraid, for never had he survived without the hand of his master to feed him. And he wandered between those trees, and he was full of fear, and Serhiy caught the scent of a creature not totally unfamiliar. And within moments he found himself snout to snout with a creature that was taller and leaner, long-limbed, sharp-eyed and pointed ears. It was wolf. Now, why a creature tame and mild should make his way into my wild? Serhiy told the wolf how he had been driven from the farm, how he did not know how to survive here in the wild, and cousin Wolf sheltered him that night. In the morning, the wolf said,
But if you drive me from the farm, they will welcome you back with open arms.
And the wolf and the dog, as the daylight grew, wandered away from the forest and across the fields until they came to the farmyard. And in that early morning light, the wolf leapt over the fence and the dog hid behind. And the wolf crept towards the back door, where the farmer's wife, just moments before, had left the baby in the cradle to take the morning air. And the wolf opened his mouth, and between his sharp teeth he gently picked up the babe. And over the gate once more he leapt and away. And now Serhiy, that old dog, began to bark loud, as only old dogs know how. Show me how that dog might have barked, please, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. And he went chasing after the wolf, and out of the farm came the farmer and his wife. Our child, our baby, carried away by the wolf. And they went running across the fields, but Serhiy was faster, and now he leapt upon that wolf's back, and there was a flurry of tails and teeth. It was dust, and nothing was seen until there was the wolf howling, yelping, and back towards the trees, and now it was Serhiy returning towards the farm with the baby. And the farmer's wife ran, and she took her babe in her arms, and the farmer said, "Serhiy, you have saved our babe from the wild wolf. How could I ever have driven you away? Why, you are a loyal hound. I welcome you back." And so it was that Serhiy was a hero. And that night a feast was arranged. A feast to celebrate the rescue of the child. Serhiy felt bad for the hungry wolf. He must be my guest of honour. So off he went, loping along between the fields. Is this a good idea? And there he went between the trees until he caught the scent of the wolf and found the wolf and invited him. And the wolf followed Serhiy. That lean and hungry wolf, that wild wolf, followed Serhiy until they came to the farm, and they went into the great stone barn, which was empty, for the feast had not yet been prepared. And there the wolf hid under the long table, and food arrived, carried by the peasants from the community who were coming to join the feast. There were delicious food, probably as good as the food you are going to eat tonight. There were sausages, there was borscht. And what else might there have been on that supper table, ladies and gentlemen?
Cheese.
Cheese! Oh, smoked cheese and...
Bread.
Fine crusted bread and...
Blini.
Blini as well. There's a lady who has travelled. And the tables were filled and the people came in, and there was the farmer sitting at the head of the table, and Serhiy was fed from his master's hand sausages and roasted meat and even blini. And it was good. And he took some of that food under the table and fed it to his hungry cousin Wolf. And Wolf ate and ate, for he had a voracious appetite. And the people were eating and they were drinking, as only, well, Ukrainian people know how. They were drinking glass after glass of vodka. And as they drank, they sang. And the song they sang is a song that we all should sing. It means let us drink, and it goes like this. Vapimo, vapimo, vapimo. And they drank and they drank and they ate and they ate, and the wolf stopped eating and said, "That's singing. I've had enough. My belly has stopped rumbling. It is my turn. Now I will sing." "No," said Serhiy, "do not sing. They will kill you. You are a wolf. You are wild. But wait, I will bring you more food." And more food was fetched, more sausages, more meat. And the other farmers said to the master of Serhiy, "Your dog is greedy. You should beat that hound." "Oh no. He deserves all he can take, for he rescued my child today. Give him more." And Serhiy went back under the table, and the wolf ate and ate and was fatter and fatter and greasier and greasier, and now the people had drank so much vodka they sang even louder than before. Vape your mo! Vape your mo! And as they sang, the wolf stopped eating. Stuffed. It is my turn. Now I will sing. And he turned his snout up under that table, and he closed his eyes, and the wolf sang as only a wolf knows how. And I'm sure you know too. 1, 2, 3. So loud did he sing. They stopped eating. They turned over the tables looking for the wolf. But the wolf continued to sing. They turned over that table. What? A wolf? They took their knives, their meat knives, and approached the wolf, who still sang, wolf, wolf. Serhiy did the only thing he knew how to save his friend wolf from those knives. He opened his mouth and bit down as hard as he could on the wolf's tail. And the wolf sprang up, his eyes popping open, and looked around to see he was about to be slaughtered. He ran, not as quick as he had been, for his belly was full, towards the door, and squeezed with a pop right through and across the farmyard and over the fence just. And he ran towards the forest and through the fields, and Serhiy went after him, barking once more. And the people came out and saw them disappearing into the night. Oh, what a hero that dog is! What a friend to all of us! Serhiy followed the wolf until they came between the trees of the dark forest, and there they stood, once more, snout to snout. Your world is tame. Your world is mild. I choose hunger. I choose wild. The wolf turned and walked between the trees, and Serhiy came back once more to a hero's welcome. And he was welcomed as never before. Part of that community he was for the rest of his days, beloved and cared for, and fed and cared for, just as he should be. But now and again, he would go out when the night was dark but the moon was full. And he would listen. And even though his hearing was weaker than it had been, he sensed that in the distance, in the forest, he could hear the howling of his good friend, cousin I chose that story to start with. It's partly tribute to Serhiy, because Serhiy is one of the people that really got me on the road to collecting stories that I learned from people around the world. And I should put something right. And most of the stories I learned from around the world, I learned here in Devon, in Exeter, where I live and where I work part-time as a teacher of English at Into University of Exeter, teaching English to overseas students. I collect stories mostly here, but I meet people from everywhere, which is very, very fortunate. But sometimes I go abroad, and sometimes I pick up stories there as well. But the stories I'm telling you today are all stories I've learned in this country, from people from around the world. And I love that story because, for me, that's a real symbol of these different cultures, the dog's world and the wolf's world. And although they're different, there's a kind of meeting of minds and an accepting of one another there in that story. Maybe they'll never live together again, but at least now they've heard each other's stories. And you know what they say? When two enemies have heard each other's stories, they can no longer be enemies. There's a student more recently that my wife Tammy and I taught at the university called Ryan. And you think, that's a very English name. But all of the Chinese students we teach, or nearly all of them, give themselves an English nickname. Partly because it's difficult for us to learn Chinese pronunciation, but also it's just part of their culture to come and have, and often it's been given to them by teachers back in China, or sometimes they choose it because of a favourite person. I don't know whether Ryan is a Manchester United fan or not. Anyway, Ryan told us this story, and here's a story with a bit of wisdom, as so many Chinese stories are. And it's really lovely to do storytelling and work in the academic classroom, because there's a real sharing of culture. And in most of the cultures that we teach, which are mostly Asian, there's such a strong thread of oral storytelling in their cultures that it's kind of unbroken in a way that's a little bit different from the UK, where storytellers like myself are kind of reviving an old tradition. There's almost a resurgence of storytelling going on in this country. And it's often being used in education and entertainment, whereas in Asian cultures it's not often seen as part of education, it's seen much more as family and tradition. So a lot of our students have come with stories that they've picked up from families, or sometimes from elementary school as well. And Dongguo and the Wolf is a story that Ryan gave to me. Once there was a wise man, a very holy man. His name was Dongguo. He was full of kindness. He wouldn't hurt a fly. Indeed, he literally wouldn't hurt a fly. He travelled with his donkey. But when he travelled, Dongguo himself would carry the load. He didn't want to burden his friend donkey. And one day, Dongguo and the donkey were walking through the forest along the path, and suddenly there appeared in front of them, yes, you've guessed it, a wild wolf. And the wolf was injured. It had been shot by an arrow in its side. And it looked at Dongguo pitifully and asking for pity. I have been injured. Kind man, take out this arrow from my wound. Dongguo looked at the wolf. I know about wolves. If I approach you, you will devour me. I am not a wolf who would devour a man. Come, take this arrow from my wound. I will not harm you. Dongguo took pity upon this creature, and he stepped forward and he drew the arrow from the bloody wound. Hide me, said the wolf. My bag is small. Hide me, said the wolf. So Dongguo emptied his small bag of all belongings, and he helped the wolf to climb inside. It seemed improbable that the wolf fitted inside the bag. And Dongguo tied it and heaved it onto his back and carried on along the way. Soon there appeared the hunter. Where is the wolf that I shot? Has it gone past you? No wolf has gone past me, said Dongguo. The hunter went off along the track searching, and when he had gone, Dongguo put down the sack and opened the sack, and the wolf climbed out, and no longer did the wolf seem so sick. And the wolf looked at Dongguo, and he was slavering. What, are you going to eat me? Said Dongguo. I am a wolf. But you lied to me, you tricked me. I am a wolf. Who has ever heard of a wolf that does not eat a man? And when the donkey heard this, the donkey went running along the path, leaving Dongguo alone. Dongguo said, do not eat me. Do not eat me. If you are to do this, then I beg of you the 3 judgments that everyone has a right to before they are sentenced. I will ask 3 judgments of the ancients. And the wolf reluctantly agreed. Just in that place in the forest there stood an ancient pear tree. No longer did fresh and ripe fruit hang from its branches. You are an ancient tree, said Dongguo. I freed this wolf, I rescued him from the hunter, but now he wants to devour me. What is your judgment? Should the wolf be allowed? And the ancient tree spoke. When I was young, I bore much fruit, and the people came and plucked my pears, and they loved me. But now I am old and I bear no more. Soon they will come with their axes and chop me down and burn me for firewood. I say the wolf may eat the man. The wolf prepared. Another judgment I seek. And it just so happened that at that moment, lumbering along the track, came an ox. And the ox was old. And Dongguo said, "Old ox, wise old ox, this wolf will devour me, but I saved him from the wolf. What is your judgment?" And the ox spoke. "Many years did I work for man, pulling the plough. Now I can no longer. Before man fed me and cared for me, but soon he will come and he will slaughter me, and he will cook my tough meat and tenderize it, and he will take my hide and use it. I say the wolf may devour the man." "Two judgments," said the wolf. "Now I will devour you." "I have begged for three," said Dongguo, and at that moment along the path came an old farmer. And the farmer carried his hoe across his shoulder. And Dongguo said to the old farmer, "Stop, I implore you. This wolf will devour me, yet I saved him from the hunter. I seek your judgment." And the farmer said, "Tell me exactly what happened." And Dongguo began to explain the story. "What?" said the farmer. You took the arrow from the wound. What are you saying? You put this wolf inside that small bag that you indicate? This is not possible. I cannot believe it." "I assure you it is true," said the wolf. "How can I believe that such a great and terrifying wolf could fit in such a small bag?" "Why, it is true," said the wolf. "I cannot believe it," said the farmer, "unless I see it with my own eyes." And now the wolf said, "Very well," for he was hungry. And the wolf climbed inside the bag. And as soon as the wolf was inside the bag, the farmer seized the bag and tied it. And the farmer turned to Dongguo and said, "Now, what is your judgment?" And Dongguo hesitated, for Dongguo was a kind and holy man. "Ah," said the farmer, and he seized his hoe. And how do you want the story to finish? He seized his hoe and he began to strike that sack harder and harder. And the wolf howled inside in pain and in agony, and he beat and beat until the wolf was dead. And he turned to Dongguo and he said, "You should know. Whoever heard of a man who would look after an enemy like the wolf? Do you not know that wolves eat men?" And the farmer went on along the way, and Dongguo remained there alone in the forest, contemplating. Yes, you don't get tidy endings in these Something to ponder. But do just ask the person next to you, how did you want that story to finish?
Well, I wanted the donkey to come back and brave the situation, rather than pray the situation right, brave the situation right. Is that... That's what I wanted.
We'll learn more about that donkey in another story. The donkey that you're talking about features in another story that I'm going to tell you this evening. Yes, the braying donkey, absolutely. It's interesting, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this, that folk tales are not generally not fixed to one part of the world. There are variants of the same tale in many different cultures. Indeed, that story of Dongguo and the wolf, which Ryan assures me, and I believe him because I know this is likely to be true, this story's been told for more than 1,000 years in China, and was written down more than 1,000 years ago indeed. But there are tales very similar to that in other parts of the world. Indeed, there's an African story that I know, which is not with a wolf, but with a crocodile that's saved when the crocodile has wandered too far from the river's banks. and the good man brings the crocodile back to the shore of the banks of the river, and then the crocodile is about to eat him, and he begs the wisdom of 3 old ones. So it's almost the same story, but with a different ending. And in that ending, the wise one says, get back in the bag, and the crocodile's back in the bag. And then they carry the crocodile back to the place where he started, far from the river bank, lost. So there's no kind of conclusion exactly, but there is that sense of it's come full circle, which is interesting because it's an African story with a very kind of Zen or kind of Buddhist kind of feel about it. So you have these interesting discrepancies and relationships between stories in many cultures. Maybe that story reminds you of a story you've heard before.
Well, this arrow thing is quite true. And I take the National Geographic, and a few months ago, there was a story. They got elephant orphanage out in, I think it's Kenya or somewhere.
Nairobi.
Yes.
Nairobi.
And when the elephants have had a year or two, I suppose, they begin to feel the call of the wild, and they let them go off, and they go off and join herds and so on. Well, apparently one elephant came back with an arrow in its side, and more or less said, please take it out, and they did. Is that right?
I don't know that one,
Mm.
but I know it is.
And then, did the elephant become a friend of the community, or did he charge at them?
No, he just went off back into the wild again. I mean, he came back
To be healed by by man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've got a strong sense that it's time to go to Africa. So let's have an African story. And you probably noticed my djembe drum here next to me. And I want to share a story not far from the part of the world you know. A story from down here in Zimbabwe, Mozambique area, from Shona culture. 2 years ago, I was at a conference that I go to every year called the IATEFL Conference. IATEFL stands for the International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language. And teachers from all over the world who teach English come to this conference. It's one of the biggest teaching conferences there are. There's over 2,000 teachers come every year. And every year I go, and every year I do storytelling at this conference and do workshops on storytelling in language teaching. And 2 years ago I met Tawanda and Nhire Nelson Antonio. And Tawanda lives in Mozambique, but he's of Shona culture. And he speaks his first language, his mother language is Shona. His second language is Portuguese. His third language is English, which is the language that he teaches in Mozambique. And as I tend to do, I asked him for a story. And he was very, he was reticent at first, but finally agreed. And I was so glad that I persisted because the story he gave me I've been telling ever since. And I've been in communication with Tawanda ever since. In fact, Tawanda was married a couple of months ago, just before Christmas, and sent me some photographs of his wonderful white wedding in Mozambique. He was in a beautiful white suit, as was his wife. And this is the story. And I asked him about this story. He said, this is a story that I will tell, we'll sort that out later, that I will tell to my students, the children that I teach. And I said, well, why do you tell this story? And he said, well, you can tell me, why do you think Tawanda tells this story? I'm going to just try and stick that there. Okay. And maybe, I think I'm feeling this might be a good time to introduce you to the bean pod of the flame tree. It's a dried out bean pod that makes a wonderful shaking sound. And I've got more than one, I've got several. So Tammy, would you be kind enough to distribute some of these bean pods for people who feel that they like, people who like to think they've got a sense of rhythm. It doesn't matter whether you have or not. If you think you have, then please take the bean pod and pass them along.
Absolutely.
Would you like a little one? Like a bean I've got one more. I don't know what you can do with it yet. I'll let you know when it's time to join in. I know it's very tempting. But even the primary school children I tell stories to know that they have to wait until I let them know. I'm sure you can manage that. Now, in Shona culture, the traditional story beginning, in many African stories, there's a call and response. So the beginning of the storyteller says, Kwaivepo. And Kwaivepo means long ago. And the audience, the listeners, respond by saying, Zep Funde. And Zep Funde in Shona means Tawanda said it kind of means we are into the story. And I think it's a kind of contract. So by saying we are into the story, Zep Funde, they are saying we are going to join with you in the story. Zep Funde. Okay, let's try it. Kwaivepo.
Zep Funde.
Kwaivepo.
Zep Funde.
Kwaivepo.
Zep Funde.
Long ago, there was a farmer, and the farmer had a donkey, an old donkey, and he called this donkey Mbongoro, which means foolish old donkey. And he had a donkey keeper, and the donkey keeper looked after the donkey, he fed the donkey, he watered the donkey, he groomed the donkey every day. But one morning the donkey keeper came and he found that Mbongoro had gone. He had broken his tether and he had run. What can I do? The donkey keeper went walking through the fields and he called, Mbongoro, Mbongoro, Mbongoro. Mbongoro, Mbongoro, Mbongoro. Could he find the donkey? He came to the workers who worked for the farmer, digging in the fields. Oh, help me, help me. The farmer's donkey has escaped. We must find it. So they put down their spades and they went with him. And together they called. Me first. Okay, listen. Mbongoro, Mbongoro, Mbongoro. Mbongoro, Mbongoro, Mbongoro. Mbongoro, Mbongoro, Mbongoro. But could they find him? No. You must go back, they said to the donkey keeper, and tell the farmer. So he went back across the fields and he was afraid. But when he came to the farmer's door, he knocked and the farmer opened the door. The Mbongoro has broken his tether and escaped, and I cannot find him. Ah, that foolish old donkey, said the farmer. I will come with you. So now together the farmer and the donkey keeper and all of the workers from the fields, they went searching for the Mbongoro. They went through the fields searching. Let's get this rhythm going. Could they find the donkey? No. Yes, they could. In the distance, they heard the sound. This is your moment, Richard. And there, they approached and they found that donkey. He was in a waterhole, which he had fallen into the darkness. It was small. It was as long as the donkey was from his nose to his tail. It was as wide as the donkey was from one flank to the other. It was as deep as the donkey was from the tips of his ears down to his hooves. He was stuck fast. Mbongoro, get out of the hole, said the farmer. The donkey just looked up at him. Pull him out. And the workers grabbed handfuls of the donkey's fur, poor thing, and they pulled. But they could not move him. Fetch a rope, said the farmer. But when the donkey keeper returned, he could not get the rope around the donkey. The hole was too tight. There is nothing for it, said the farmer. Workers, go to the fields and bring your spades. And they went off and they returned with their spades. Yes? Yes? What are we to do? This old donkey is of no use to me anymore, said the farmer. Bury my donkey alive. What? Bury the donkey. Bury the donkey alive. He is of no use to me anymore. The workers were afraid, but they could not refuse, and they took their spades and they dug in the soft earth around the hole, and they put the earth onto the back of the Mbongoro. And they put more earth onto his back, more soft, crumbling earth onto his back. So much earth on his back. And the donkey, the old, foolish donkey, began to shake. Shake. And the earth trickled down his sides, in the small gaps, and down into the wet earth beneath his hooves. And they put more earth on top of the donkey's back, and the donkey shake, shake. And the earth went down and into the hole. And the donkey began to step, step with his hooves, tramping, damping down that earth. And slowly, slowly but surely, he began to rise. He began to rise higher and higher in the hole. And as he rose, the donkey rose higher, and the workers put more earth on his back. And as they put more earth on his back, they sang. Until the donkey rose right out of that hole. And he stepped out of the hole and stood there. And the workers and the donkey keeper, they looked at that foolish old donkey, and they looked at that foolish old farmer, and they wondered which one was the greater fool. Tawanda and Nhire, Nelson Antonio. I always think of Tawanda when I'm telling that story. There's a real tradition in storytelling, in oral storytelling, of having a sense of who gave me the story, and the person who gave them the story. Because I know that Tawanda didn't learn that story from a book. He learned it from a person. So there's a whole lineage, a line going right back into maybe even hundreds of years where that story might have changed. Because there's other variants of that story in other cultures as well. But that's the story he told to me. And why does Tawanda tell that story to the children he teaches?
Never give up.
Yeah, you can always get out of a sticky situation.
Even if it does take
Not so many stories telling us that very message. So I'm going to tell you a story that I learned, and that's actually on that website. In fact, some of the ones, no, they weren't. The ones we had already aren't on that website. I'll tell you about that later. But this one is. And it's a story that I learned from Yusef. And Yusef comes from Turkey, and he lives in London, and he teaches Turkish, mostly, I think, to the children of Turkish second generation or third generation migrants. So they're wanting to keep the Turkish language alive. So he's teaching Turkish in London. And Yusef told me a few stories when I met him at a language teaching conference in London. And this is one of the stories he taught me, which is, I say, on the CD. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So, oh, by the way, there are hundreds, literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of stories about Nasruddin Hoxha or Johar. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? No. Nasruddin Hoxha is a character that appears across Asia, especially in the Near East, and he's a kind of wise fool. And there are many, many short stories. The stories are always short, and there's always a twist at the end. There's always a joke at the end. And the stories are told in I'd say, the Middle East, as far as China and India. They're also told in Russia. They're known throughout the Balkans and North Africa. So the whole of the Arabic-speaking world. Everybody knows and tells stories of Johar from people of all ages. So this is one of thousands of Johar or Effendi or Deju, depending on which country you're in. They call him different names. but we'll call him Nasruddin Hoxha because I learnt this from a Turkish man called Yusef. And they say that he was born in the 14th century in Konya, but you know, everybody says, oh, you know, he belongs to us, but the Turks are quite passionate about Nasruddin Hoxha. So Hoxha, Nasruddin, he had a sheep, lovely sheep, and his neighbours came and they said, Nasruddin Hoxha, your sheep has grown big and fat. It's time to slaughter the sheep. It's time to have a feast. Why don't we have a feast? Nasruddin Hoxha, this is my sheep. Oh no. No. And he said, oh come on Nasruddin, it's going to be delicious, the sun is shining, it's a beautiful day, we can roast the meat. Not ready, said Hoxha. And they were desperate to taste succulent lamb. And they said, but Hoxha Nasruddin, and they knew he was a fool. Haven't you heard? The world is going to end tomorrow. The world is going to end tomorrow. Oh, very well. We will have a feast. And together they went, leading the sheep down to the riverside, and there he took his knife and he slaughtered the sheep and he prepared. And the friends, it was so hot, they took off their robes and they jumped into the river and they swam around, splashing happily, keeping cool in the water, while Nasruddin, he built a fire and he made a spit and he skinned and he worked and he turned the spit, and it was hot work, and there was Nasruddin Hoxha doing all the work, preparing the meal, as some people have been outside and in here as well. Hard work, while they were all enjoying themselves in the cool fresh water. And after a long time they smelt the delicious roasting meat. And when they smelt this, they climbed out of the river and they came to Nasruddin Hoxha and they said, Nasruddin Hoxha, the meat smells very good, but where are our clothes? And Nasruddin Hoxha said, well, I didn't have enough wood, so I used your clothes to make the fire to cook the meat. And they said, but Nasruddin, these are our clothes! Nasruddin Hoxha! They said, oh, what are you worried about? Haven't you heard? The world is going to end tomorrow. There are literally thousands of Nasruddin Hoxha stories. He's foolish, but there's always a little bit of wisdom. So we've had stories from different parts of Asia. We've been to Africa. I think we should make a trip across the Atlantic to the Americas. And there's a woman who lives in Devon called Isabel Gomez. And she's from Caracas in Venezuela, which I had the pleasure of visiting a long time ago. And she told me this story. It's a very quick one, a bit in the same vein, let's say, as the last one. It's a story with a twist at the end. A very little dog. You had an old dog over here, you had a young dog, and you've got a little dog. Is it a little one? What kind of dog is it?
Tricolour crossbreed terrier.
Think tricoloured crossbreed terrier when you hear this story. Is he smart?
Yes.
He's smart. This is definitely the dog in this story. And he's naughty as well. Well, this little dog was in trouble. This little dog was lost in the forest. Does that sound familiar? This little dog was lost in the forest.
We know wolves in the forest.
Deep in the forest, this little dog was lost. But this is in the Venezuelan jungle. There he was, lost in the forest. And he came and he got more and more lost, and then suddenly he found himself in a clearing, and in front of him there was a pile of gleaming white bones. He was really afraid. He sniffed at these bones, and just then, as he sniffed, he caught the scent of another creature behind him. And he knew what it was. It was a panther. Powerful panther. And he caught the scent. And Little Dog had to think very quickly. Little Dog was smart. And Little Dog said, that was a delicious panther. And the panther turned and fled. Well, Monkey was up in the tree, and Monkey had heard this. And Monkey said, I'm the cleverest in the forest. Can't have a little dog taking over my role. I'm going to make sure that little dog gets eaten. And the monkey went swinging off through the trees until he found Panther. And he told Panther, little dog was tricking you. Come back with me. You can eat him. And Monkey rode on the panther's back as the panther prowled through the forest and back towards the clearing. And Little Dog was still there, and he was afraid, he was lost. He was still there in front of the pile of bones when, oh, again, that panther's behind me. And out of the corner of his eye, he saw the monkey on the panther's back. What can I do? What can I do? Oh! I've been waiting so long for that monkey to bring that other panther. And the panther went flying away again. And I'll tell you, it was not the little dog that the panther had for tea that day. So, the lesson that Isabel taught me in this story is, don't be like the monkey and tell tales. Don't be like the panther and believe everything you hear. Be like the little dog. Use your imagination. Un cuento venezolano. Okay, vamos a ver. We had a couple of merry little quip tales. I think it's time for something different. We'll have a song. And there's a wonderful singer that some of you may have heard of who lives in Exeter, I think, called Sarah Owen. Anybody heard of Sarah Owen? Look out for Sarah Owen. She is the most fabulous singer. She sings in different languages. She sings together with Elena from Bulgaria, listening traditional Bulgarian music in extraordinary harmonies. Sarah teaches music. She works with Wren music. Wren? They do a lot of workshops in schools and communities around Devon. Wren Trust.
Yeah.
She's a fabulous musician, and Tammy and I used to go to workshops with Sarah, and one of the workshops she taught us this song. And some of you might know it actually. It's an old English folk song, and it's a story as well, so it fits the bill. And it's called Jennifer Gentle. And it's about three sisters. And before we sing the song, got the message? Before we sing the song, I want to tell you a little bit about the story of Jennifer Gentle. There's three sisters. The youngest sister, all three sisters are very beautiful, and they live in a house protected by a gate. And one day, to that house comes the devil. And the devil is very interested in these three beautiful girls. And he wants to find his way in. And the eldest sister tells him, go, leave. And the second sister says, if he remains here, we will be tricked. But the youngest sister, innocent, she allows him in. And now he has this youngest sister in his power. She is helpless, but playful, toying with her. The devil sets her a challenge. I will let you go if you can solve 5 questions, if you can solve 5 riddles. And I wonder if you could solve the 5 riddles. Here they are. Are you ready? Yeah. I'm going to say them very quickly. What is sharper than a thorn? What is broader than the way? These are 5 different things. What is louder than a horn? What is colder than the clay? And what is rounder than a ring? I'll say those again, so you have to give you a chance to think about it. Okay. First one. What is sharper than a thorn? What is broader than the way? What is louder than a horn? And what is colder than the clay? What is rounder than a ring? And I'll give you a moment to see if you can find some answers with the person sitting next to you before we think of something. Can you guess any of those?
The ring.
5 things. 5 different things. All right. Well, it's a song, and it's a song story. Many folk songs, as you know, lots of British folk songs are stories. They're narratives. And this song has a refrain, and the refrain is here. And some of you might be able to see it, but it doesn't matter if you can't, because Tammy and I will teach it to you. Just got to find the right key.
Perhaps you ought to find the right key.
Oh yes,
You're
yes, I'm
missing most of
going to be
it.
singing most of it. Okay. Right, we go. And the words that Tammy's put here, very, very sensibly, she's put them up and down according to where the melody goes. Okay, so we go there. Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary. Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary. That's the first refrain. And the other one, as the dove flies over the mulberry tree. As the dove flies over the mulberry tree. Does anybody know this song already? Oh, it's up to us then.
But you might recognise it when David gets going.
The devil came unto the gate.
Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary.
For 3 long days and 3 nights did wait.
As the dove flies over the mulberry tree.
The eldest sister bid him leave.
Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary.
The second swore they would be deceived.
As the dove flies over the mulberry tree.
The youngest sister let him in.
Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary.
And barred the door with a silver pin.
As the dove flies over the mulberry tree.
If you can answer my questions 5.
Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary.
And if you fail, maid, you will be mine.
As the dove flies over the mulberry tree.
Oh, what is sharper than a thorn? And what is broader than the way? Oh, what is louder than a horn? And what is colder, colder than the clay? Oh, what is rounder than a ring?
Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary.
Now unto me your 5 answers bring.
As the dove flies over the mulberry tree.
This is where the youngest sister has to think so quick and so smart, but will she solve all 5? But brave she sang. Oh, hunger's sharper than a thorn, and love is broader than the way. Oh, shame is louder than a horn, and death is colder, colder than the clay. The world is rounder than a ring.
Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary.
Now unto you I my answers bring.
As the dove flies over the mulberry tree.
And as she did, her 5 answers name.
Jennifer Gentle and Rosemary.
He flew away in a blazing flame.
As the dove flies over the mulberry tree.
So a story song that we learned from Sarah Owen. So what, did anybody get any of those 5 answers? What was it? Sharper than a thorn? Wit. In the story it was hunger. Wit is sharp. So that's a nice answer. Broader than the way? Louder than a horn?
Shame.
Colder than the clay? Death. And rounder than a ring? The world of stories. Okay. So I really want to tell you this story. It's a story that we're coming towards the end now. This is our penultimate story, but this is a long one, not a very long one, but longer than the last couple. And then a very, very quick one to finish, perhaps, if there's time. There's a will. And this story I learned from Nafeesa Hajir, who is currently studying where we teach. She's Kurdish. She's from Kurdistan, which, as you know, is not a country officially. She lives in the part of Kurdistan that's in Iraq. There are a number of Kurdish students that we teach, very warm and generous people to be in a classroom with. Very grateful, I think, to be having the opportunity to be funded to be studying in the UK. And Nafeesa is a writer. She's a writer of fiction. But this isn't a story that she made up. This is a story that's told traditionally among Kurdish people. And a beautiful story, in my opinion. And this is a story that Nafeesa Hajir taught to me. There was a shepherd, and one day the shepherd took his sheep to graze in the country, in a sunny place. And there, as the sheep were eating, the shepherd took his pipe and began to play a beautiful tune. And as he played, from the rocks there appeared a snake. And the snake came close, and the shepherd was afraid, but he continued to play, and as he played, the snake began to move side to side, writhing, a strange dance. And as the snake danced, the shepherd continued to play until he could play no more. And then the snake went back among the rocks and returned with 1 gold coin. And the shepherd took that gold coin and took his sheep and back to his home, and he told no one what had happened. But the next day he thought of this and he decided to return. And he went with his sheep to that place, and he took his pipe and he began to play. Again, that beautiful melody. And the snake appeared from between the rocks. And once more, the snake danced for the shepherd. A strange, strange dance. And when he had finished playing, the snake disappeared between the rocks and returned with a gold coin. And the shepherd took this, and the next day he played. And the day after that, and every day he came and played, and the snake every day gave him a gold coin. But he told no one. Until the day, that is, that he was summoned to the city. And the shepherd went to the city, but before he went, he told his son what he must do. And his son took his father's pipe and knew which melody he must play, and took the sheep to that very same place where the sun shone. And as the sheep grazed, he began to play upon the pipe that same beautiful tune. And as he played, from between the rocks appeared the snake. And the snake writhed and danced that strange dance. And after he had played a long time, the snake came between the rocks and returned with 1 gold coin. And the next day the shepherd's son played, and again the snake brought him a gold coin. But on the third day the son thought, this snake has a lot of gold. Why should I play every day? And as he was playing upon his pipe that strange tune and the strange dance, he thought, if I killed the snake, why, I could go among the rocks and find all his gold. And carefully he picked up a rock, and then he stopped playing and he hurled the rock towards the snake to kill the snake, but the snake was too quick, and the snake escaped, only losing the end of its tail. And the snake turned and bit the shepherd's son, who fell down dead. When the shepherd returned from the city, he heard that his son had been killed by snake poison, and he knew that his son must have done an ill deed. The next day he took his sheep and came with his pipe to that place. And he played. The snake appeared, and the snake
did not dance. Why do you not dance as you have danced before? I do not dance, said the snake, because you do not play as you did before. When you play now, you see me, who killed your son. I cannot dance as I danced before, because when I see you, I remember your son, who attacked me, so I lost my tail. I will not dance again. I will never dance again, said the snake, until man has learned to be true. There we are. Not very long. That's Nafeesa Hajir, the Kurdish tale. Tale. That tale, along with some of the other tales that I've told today, Dog and the Wolf, Dongguo and the Wolf, Mbongoro, and The Little Dog, all of those stories are in a book that I've almost completed. It's a collection of stories from around the world with activities for teachers to use in a teaching context. And I'm just the final stages of arranging a publisher, so quite excited. So these are the stories that are about to be published, for especially for teachers to be using in classrooms with students of all ages, really. And the tale that I want to finish off with is a tale that also comes from the Middle East, but this is a story I learned from Hanna Jaffe, who's a storyteller from Jerusalem. She's Jewish, and she was travelling around different parts of Europe with a Muslim cleric doing storytelling for peace. And they came to Exeter last year to the Methodist Church and did an event, which was very moving because they were from the two sides, although they're friends, and telling stories from both their traditions, which are about peace and reconciliation, as so many of the wisdom tales from the Middle East are. And her story was it's one of the shortest stories, but a lovely story. It was very, very, very cold. It was winter cold. It was as cold as it was last week. You remember how cold it was? It was as cold as that. And there was a father and a son, and they were very, very poor. In fact, they were so poor that their house had a door that hung loose on the hinges and the wind blew right through. And they had one small fire, and the old man would try to warm himself by the fire, but the wind blew in and it was so cold. And his son went out into the fields and worked very hard, but it was freezing out on the fields. Now the problem was that they only had one coat between them. And the old man said, "Oh, my son, I need the coat. I need the coat. I am old and I am sitting here in front of the fire, but the wind is blowing through and I am so cold. Let me have the coat." And the son said, "No, father, I must have the coat. You at least have the fire, but I'm working out there in the fields. And it is so cold out in the fields, the wind blows right through me. I need the coat more than you." And his father said, "But I need the coat. You're keeping warm, doing all that physical exertion. I need the coat." And they couldn't agree. So in the end, they took the coat and they went to the house of the wise one. And the wise one opened the door and they both started arguing about, I should have the coat. And the wise one listened, and then he held out his hands and he took the coat from them and he said, "I will have the coat. I'm going to keep the coat. Come back later." And he slammed the door closed. And they looked at each other, the father and the son, and neither of them had the coat. And they went back and the old man sat in front of the fire trying to keep warm. And he thought about his son. And his son was out there in the fields and he was working so hard. But he was freezing cold. But he thought about his poor old father sitting in front of that tiny fire with the wind blowing through. And his son thought, "Oh, my father really should have that coat. He needs it more than me." And the father in front of the fire said, "Well, at least I have a fire, but my poor son is out there in the fields with the wind blowing right through him. He needs the coat more than I do. His need is greater than mine." And when his son came home, he started, you need the coat." "No, father, you need the coat." And they started trying to give each other. And in the end, they went to the house of the
Wise man.
And they knocked on the door, and the door opened, and there was the wise one. And they both started telling him, my father should have the coat. And after listening to him, the wise one held out the coat. And he said, here is the coat. Take it. Before, when you came to me, both of you wanted the coat for yourself. So I wanted the coat for myself. But now you both want to give the coat. So now I want to give the coat. And here is my coat as well. And he closed the door, and the father and the son both went home, and each of them had a coat. Story from the Jewish tradition I learned from Hanna Jaffe. Those are the stories I wanted to share with you this evening. I really enjoyed your participation. If you want to tell anybody about what I do, and schools or any community settings, then please do. I've got some cards there. And it's been a real pleasure to do storytelling this evening with Friends of Coldharbour Mill. Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you very much.